Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Apostole. My presentation will make some people sad and some others angry. But all I have to say is don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the messenger, okay? I'll just tell you what I see in the latest studies. So just a quick snapshot of who I am for few that don't know me. And a quick refresher course on LNG. We know by now that natural gas, when it's emitted unburned in the atmosphere, is 86 times worse than CO2. So it's a methane in the atmosphere is a potent greenhouse gas. In the last 300 years, the increase in CO2 of the atmosphere was 50%, whereas the increase in methane in the atmosphere was 250%. In other words, you have something that increases in the atmosphere 5 times faster than CO2 and does 86 times the damage in a time frame of 20 years ahead of when it is emitted. Let's look fast at alternative fuels. Now, starting with hydrogen, we call it grey hydrogen. Why? Because it comes from natural gas. 70% of the hydrogen produced today in the world comes from natural gas. You see over there also the number 27. 27% of hydrogen is being produced from coal. 3% is being produced from electrolysis, of which only 1% is green hydrogen. In other words, only 1% of this electrolysis produced hydrogen is using renewable electricity for the electrolysis. And if you go that route, you need huge amounts of electricity. You need 55 kilowatt hours for every kilogram of hydrogen you produce. And if you take that electricity from a typical city grid, you emit 49 kilograms of CO2 for every kilogram of hydrogen you produce. Ammonia, also, since it comes from grey hydrogen, we call it grey ammonia. You add nitrogen to the hydrogen to get ammonia. And where do you get the nitrogen from? You get it, the fancy word is by oxidizing the air. In other words, by burning the air. You burn the oxygen in the air, you end up with nitrogen, you take this hydrogen, you add it to hydrogen and you have ammonia. Methanol, almost all of the methanol being produced now is also produced from natural gas, emitting 9 to 12 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of methanol you produce. Now, hydrogen, today's production per year is 87 million tons, which is not much. And as I said, it's being mostly produced from natural gas. The emissions to produce this hydrogen today is 830 million tons of CO2 per year, which happens to be exactly the same as the emissions of the shipping industry. This is the CO2 produced when the ships burn 250 million tons of fossil fuels. Now, hydrogen has many colors depending on where you get it from. It can be brown if you get it from coal, gray from natural gas. If you collect the carbon dioxide while you produce it from natural gas and store it, this is blue hydrogen. Electrolysis with renewable energy, you get green hydrogen. If you use nuclear power for the electrolysis, that's pink, and so on and so forth. Yellow is if you use solar power, and so on. So let's look a little bit into economics. The total bunkering infrastructure, the existing infrastructure we have, is estimated at a cost of 2.5 trillion. This is what we have now. All the ships in the world have an estimated cost of 1.5 trillion. If we move to green hydrogen or green ammonia, we need to throw away the existing infrastructure in the existing ships and replace them at a total cost of $9.5 trillion. So to replace the existing infrastructure, you need more than the cost of the current infrastructure, because those fuels, hydrogen and ammonia, are much more difficult to handle. Of course, the question is there a fuel, green or otherwise, that can use the existing infrastructure? And the only fuel that can use the existing infrastructure is methanol. So that's a plus for methanol. I mean, you can even retrofit a ship to burn methanol, and you can retrofit an engine to burn methanol. Now, if you're talking about green methanol, of course, you get green hydrogen, you add CO2 to it, which is not an easy process, and it's not easy, and that's why it's more expensive than ammonia. You get methanol and water. But a big question is, would green hydrogen and the green fuels that come from hydrogen will save us? And here is the breaking news about hydrogen. Hydrogen, green or not, is a potent greenhouse gas. Now, studies before 2020 would say that hydrogen is 10 to 12 times worse than CO2. Mind you, hydrogen is not a direct greenhouse gas like methane, it's an indirect one, and I'll explain how it works. Recent studies, however, after 2020, say hydrogen is 60, some of them say 200 times worse than CO2. Practically, all the recent studies say, oops, we were wrong, it's much worse than we thought before. And this is if hydrogen escapes to the atmosphere unburned. This is one of those studies, respectable, fully respectable journals with big impact factors, University of Cambridge, and so on. Those are, I'm not gonna elaborate too much, some graphs from the studies. Now, hydrogen works in 3 ways to superheat the atmosphere. The first way is that it binds with a hydroxyl free radical. And what it does is that it prevents methane in the atmosphere from binding with hydroxyl. And the result of that is that methane stays potent in the atmosphere for a longer time. You see in the small diagram below, this is the potency of methane in the atmosphere. As time passes, the potency decreases. So the first 5 years, it's 120 times worse than CO2. In 100 years, it's 28 or 30 times worse than CO2. The reason is methane binds with hydroxyl and it's not methane anymore. But hydrogen binds with hydroxyl before. It is faster. So methane doesn't have hydrogen free radicals, so many, to bind and reduce its potency. The second way it acts is that during this, I have the equations there, during these chemical reactions it produces ozone in the troposphere, which is a greenhouse gas. And the third way hydrogen acts to superheat the atmosphere is it produces water vapor in the stratosphere, which also acts to warm the atmosphere. A quote from one of the studies, hydrogen indirect warming potency per unit mass is around 200 times that of carbon dioxide, and of course, larger than that of methane. So the question now is, okay, that happens when hydrogen leaks to the atmosphere. How much hydrogen leaks to the atmosphere? Well, hydrogen is the smallest molecule, actually the second smallest molecule in the universe after helium. It is 8 times smaller than methane. It leaks from everywhere. It leaks in big amounts during electrolysis, during compression, during storage, and so on and so forth. And I added that, the previous was a quotation, it even seeps through the steel walls of containers and pipes. And of course, some of it is deliberately purged to the atmosphere. And the studies, because nobody knows how much are the actual leakages of hydrogen, the studies assume 5 and 10% leaks, which I find small. In talking with hydrogen experts, they told me that a joke they have among themselves is that if you send hydrogen down a pipeline, you can expect 50% of it to arrive at the other end. So the current production is 87 million tons. If we move towards a hydrogen economy, like we have been discussing in the previous panels, from green hydrogen to make green ammonia, to make green methanol, we're gonna need up to 2 billion tons per year of hydrogen to make these fuels by 2050. That means, even assuming only a 10% leak, that means a 0.4 degrees Celsius increase instead of keeping the atmospheric temperature at 1.5 degrees. So, conclusion, we are proceeding on the wrong path and at trillions cost to society. Obviously, the need to do something to curb global warming is indisputable, but pretending this something is better than what we do now, I call it criminal, both for the environment and for the world economies. Unfortunately, to decarbonize, we need new technologies. And I mention here nuclear fourth generation, totally new type, light batteries that can have huge storage capacity and so on. So, that's it for me. Thank you very much.